Hello, good afternoon everyone, and welcome to the Milford Readers and Writers Festival. I'm happy to see you all here and happy that we have these wonderful speakers and that we have some free events as we always do around town. I'd also like to thank the Water Wheel, thank Darren and Nancy for again providing this space for us. It's a great space for these things with the wheel turning in the background. So I'm just going to say that we are happy to have Tim Sohn, who is our media and social media guru. All the stuff on Facebook that you see for the festival, the pictures, the videos, and everything are thanks to Tim. And he'll be in conversation with Savio Clemente on a very important topic today. So I will turn it over to them, and thanks again for coming, and thank you, Tim and Savio.
Thank you very much, Edson, and I would love to know who is loving the Readers and Writers Festival this weekend. Yes. Well, thank you all for being here today. I'm so excited. I sound kind of weird because I'm excited to be here to have a conversation about cancer, but it's a topic that I think doesn't get talked about enough. And so I'd love to know from you guys, what are some words or thoughts that come up for you when you think about cancer? Wendy?
1 out of every 3 people. And you just started out your talk by saying it's not talked about enough. And that is the big problem. It is 1 out of every 3 people will have some form of cancer. And if all of you think about the people that you know people with cancer.
Absolutely.
And it's all kinds of cancer.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I'm really excited here to be with Savio Clemente. My name's Tim Sohn. I'm a almost 17-year cancer survivor of leukemia, chronic leukemia. So Savio, I was thinking to start off our conversation, before we came here today, I took a walk by the Delaware River. I was wondering, we both create safe spaces for people to share their stories around cancer. Is there anything that you do, any sort of routine before you have conversations around cancer?
Hi everyone, it's good to be here. Yeah, I actually have a practice. I have a meditation practice that I do every single day. It's not as complex as most people think meditation is. I just really listen to instrumental music, close my eyes, and try to get into a peaceful state. That usually involves me just clearing the mind and focusing on things that I really need to focus on. As Tim mentioned, cancer is a very heavy topic. And so I think the best thing you can do for yourself is to really get to know yourself deeper. I think we're all good at working, we're all good at playing, but I don't think as humans we are really in touch with our emotions, our mental state, even things like our dreams. I think all of it is an opportunity for us to become better people and humans and connect deeper on a deeper level. Yeah, that's my process.
I love that, and I am not the best person when it comes to getting in touch with my feelings when it comes to cancer. People who know me as the king of deflection. So yeah, but Savio, why don't you also share a bit about your cancer story? When were you diagnosed, and take us from there?
Sure. So it was July of 2014. Previous to that, I was living probably one of those healthiest lives I've ever lived in terms of exercising 6 to 7 days a week. I was eating organic foods, I was meditating, I was seeing a naturopath, I was taking vitamins, I was doing all the right things. But what ended up happening is I was going through an emotional turmoil with a business relationship with a bunch of individuals. So that was definitely taxing on me emotionally. And then my stomach started to grow bigger and bigger. I didn't quite understand what was going on. I saw a naturopath who did my blood work, and he said something is definitely wrong here. I think you really need to seek mainstream medicine. And so I ended up getting a sonogram. They did not let me leave the office for like an hour and a half, and then after an hour, they said to me, you have to have a relative come and pick you up. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm an adult, I have a car, I drove here. Like, you need to have someone come over and pick you up. I'm like, okay. So my dad picked me up, and then they said, you really need to go to the hospital. I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, just do it. Ended up going to Westchester Medical Center, which is in Valhalla, New York. The doctor looked me over, and then literally within 30 minutes, they admitted me to the 5th floor that same day. And then that night, I heard nurses whispering that I would be transferred to the 7th floor, which they called the cancer floor. So I had an inkling that it was cancer that night. I was transferred the next day. They ended up putting a nephrostomy tube in me because my stomach was growing bigger and bigger. It was called ascites initially. And then the doctor whispered in my ear it was stage 3 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I ended up spending 15 days in the hospital. The first week I was completely bedridden because I had that tube set in my abdomen. They ended up doing a bone marrow aspiration. Thankfully, it did not go any further than it needed to go. I was told 3 days before the 15 days that I was there that I needed to start my first round of chemotherapy. It was very taxing because previous to that, I went for like yearly checkups, but I didn't really rely too much on mainstream medicine. I was doing all the right things. And the medical director looked at me and she's like, listen, we've heard your story. I've heard it from the other residents and the other doctors. It's wonderful that you live a very natural lifestyle, but I'm telling you now, if you do not get your first round of chemo, you might not be here. And I'm like, really? She's like, really? Okay. So I ended up getting my first round of chemotherapy. I had 6 successive rounds every 3 weeks. And I did a combination of both conventional chemo, and then I did a whole bunch of other healing modalities because I myself wanted to figure out for myself, how do I take myself from where I was previously to where I am now, and even bigger and better. And fortunately, my story goes is that I ended up doing the 6 rounds, and that same year in December, so 4.5 months later, I was told I'm in remission. This December will be 9 years in remission. And so I've dedicated my life. Life showed me a new path. My background was IT. Ended up becoming a wellness coach, board certified wellness coach, where I coach only cancer survivors. I'm a media journalist, so at this point I've interviewed 200 cancer survivors, all different walks of life, all different stages of cancer. It became a best-selling book as well. And thank you. And I'll be doing a TEDx talk next Sunday in Raleigh, North Carolina. So I've really taken the mission to heart, and I just really want to empower, amplify others. Because I believe that stories are important, and the stories that you tell allow other people to glean and to gain whatever wisdom they need to live the best life they can. Oh, yeah. So Tim, can you share your cancer journey?
Thank you, Savio. Sure. So I was in my 20s, and I was living in New Jersey at the time. And I just remembered Savio and I were actually in conversation about a year ago at a cancer event that I host. And I just remembered when you had said that we both went to Westchester Medical Center. So that's pretty crazy. But it was about 17 years ago, and I discovered some purple bruises or blotches on my legs, something I hadn't had before. And so I went to my primary care physician, and they took some blood work. And not too long later, they called me up and told me that I needed to go to the hospital immediately. So I went to the hospital immediately, and I went to Westchester Medical Center. And I was there 4 days, I believe, and I was diagnosed with chronic myeloid leukemia. There's been a lot of cancer in my family, but I really never expected it to show up show up in me. So my treatment plan was that I needed to take oral chemotherapy medication, which I still do. I took one when I started called Clemente, and now I take one called Sprycel, and I'll have to take it for the rest of my life. I had cancer until 2021. About 6 months ago, I want to say, it came back in a small amount. Saw my oncologist a few months later, it came down a little bit more. So I'm very hopeful. Now I have conversations in person or online. I host a weekly live stream show called Showing Up Perspectives on Cancer, where we have conversations with cancer patients, survivors, and supporters about their stories and provide resources for healing, hope, and resilience. And like I was saying before, I think it's so important to have conversations about cancer because you never know when you share your story, a piece of your story may be relatable to other people that have gone through it, no matter their connection to cancer, or they may learn something as well. So yeah, that's my story in a 17-year nutshell. So Savio, I'm curious, when you were going through your cancer journey, what drove you to beat cancer? What was your why to continue living?
Great question. Thanks. For me, it really was about, I didn't really feel like I did what I was supposed to do in this life. I felt like there was more for me to accomplish, for me to overcome. I think for me the why was also, and this is a very controversial word to use in cancer, but I felt a lot of shame around my cancer. I felt like I brought it on. I felt like it doesn't make any sense, and you'll know what this means, but I felt like I was a disappointment to my family. I mean, cancer really didn't show up in both sides of my family. I mean, I couldn't even remember when I had cancer whether or not it showed up. I mean, they kept asking my parents, what about some hereditary or like ancestral, and they were like, no, there's no signs that we know of. So I felt a lot of those, and I also felt that my physical body was like dying, but I also, this is where spirituality comes in, whatever you believe, God, Allah, whatever that great wisdom is, I also felt to a large degree that my other parts of myself was still living, like my spirit was still alive, my emotions were still vibrant. My head, I was thinking, I was like Googling my cancer. I set up a Google alert for my cancer as well. And so the big why was really, I need to find a way to beat this. And if I can beat this, I need to find a way to help others beat it as well, or help others come through the process bigger and greater. I mean, one of the through lines in my book that I found after interviewing 200 cancer survivors is this constant concept of cancer does not have to be a death sentence. I mean, we're all living, we're all here, we're all thriving, we're doing the best we can. We've lost people, but it doesn't have to mean the end. Thankfully, there's so many advances in medicine and technology that can help the process, but I think for me the why is to prove it to myself and others that it can be done. So Tim, what was the scariest part of your cancer journey?
Scariest part of my cancer journey, I would say, was my cancer coming back. Because I had had it for so long, and then it went away, and I was really hoping it would stay away. So from a physical perspective, I've felt fine since my cancer has come back, but from an emotional perspective, from a mental perspective, that's been challenging for me. So like we were saying before, I love to take walks out in nature. I've loved to do that, especially starting with COVID. Always loved nature, and also taking photography and videos of nature so I can share it with others, but also to so I can go back and look at it myself, when I'm having a hard time and I want to remember those moments. So, thank you. Talk to me about family, friends, support when it comes to your cancer journey?
The truth is, I didn't really lean a lot on support. I felt to a large degree that I could beat this, that I needed to face the demon, face the challenge all by myself. I mean, my parents were, thankfully, they're still alive, but they were helpful. My sisters, I have 2 sisters, they were helpful. But I didn't, I mean, my other sister in California, she was like, let's tell everyone, like, you know, the rally around you. And to a large degree, I think it was because of the shame that I was feeling. I didn't want to feel like a zoo animal in the hospital. I didn't want people to come visit me when I myself was still in the process of healing. So I tried to go online and try to look for resources, but this was 2014, so there was less resources, to be honest with you. And so I really just relied on what I know, what I've gleaned, what I've learned. I tend to be a very introspective person, so a large part of my cancer was knowing that there was something in it for me to figure out. You know, like, it's wonderful that the doctors do their things, but I often tell people as a wellness coach that healing doesn't always occur in the doctor's office. Healing doesn't always occur in the chemo bed. Healing doesn't always occur when you have to take that medication. Healing occurs in those small moments when you're just so tired that you can't think, when the pain is so much that you're just like, I don't know what to do. Healing occurs when you're sleeping. Healing occurs when you're writing. Healing occurs in so many different ways. And so for me, I really felt that the support, although I did receive external support, the support could only come from a power greater than me, whatever you call that power. And so I just felt that I needed to be an open vehicle for that power. And so I did what I needed to do. I literally told everyone that I knew that I'm going through something. I just need for you, you know, to just kind of let me go through the process. And so they did. And, you know, I did have rally and support around that, but it wasn't anything formal. So Tim, how did you cope physically, mentally, and emotionally?
Good question. Guess I have to use this mic thing. Physically, I felt fine for the most part during my cancer journey, and physically, I've always tried ups and downs to eat kind of a balanced lifestyle. I'm not someone that usually just has lemon water and wheatgrass or something. I don't know, but I try to, you know, do my best. And also, I love to go for walks. So I love to go for walks in Milford here, by the river, through town. That's usually my main activity kind of thing. So that's kind of the physical perspective. Also mental and emotional. Mental, also nature, I guess. I also started seeing a therapist recently. And I think therapy is also something that isn't talked about enough. Something that I'm not great with is communication, especially with some of the people that are closest to my life. So therapy has been really, really healthy for me. Yeah, emotional. I don't know. I mean, nature. Nature is all the solutions. I don't know. I just find so much peace in nature. I could just live there. And I live in Shohola, so it's pretty nature-y. Yeah, so that's that. Thanks for that question. Really good question. I'm curious of all of you who are here, what is your connection to cancer, if you have one? Are you a cancer patient? Are you a cancer survivor? Are you a cancer supporter, family member, or some other connection? So let's start out with cancer patient. Thanks for sharing. Survivor. Awesome. Supporter. Lots of supporters. Awesome. I appreciate you guys sharing, and we want this to be a conversation, so toward the end we'll have a Q&A portion for sure, and I'm really used to the engaged format with conversations doing live streams. They're very conversational-y. So Savio, what has been the biggest silver lining in your cancer journey? let's start there.
Well, thank you for mentioning nature. So I cover wellness experiences domestically and internationally, and I did something called forest bathing in Italy about 7 months ago. And there's this older woman, she took me in her early 70s, and she was so spry. So we did this forest bathing right next to because it was on the border of Italy and Austria. So we literally went to the towns of Austria. And she mentioned something really profound to me. She said, nature doesn't need us. We need nature. And it was like a light bulb moment, because I've never been really that inclined to nature. I've appreciated it, but I've never been someone to like do those things. And so I just love that you mentioned nature, because I do think there's a healing force with that. What was your question? Sorry.
What's been the biggest silver lining in your cancer journey? Sure.
I guess the biggest silver lining is really doing the work that I do. I would have never ever thought that, one, I would have cancer, stage 3, 2, that I would literally upend my work life and focus on cancer survivors and do the coaching that I do and do the journalism that I do and podcasts that I do and now a TEDx. It's really shown me an avenue where I feel like it lights me up and I can do a good service in the world, that I'm fulfilling a need that I never really thought of ever. And also, I just love the victory story. I love this idea of coming through something really horrible and finding a way to transmute, transform, overcome those challenges. Because whatever your belief system is, I do think we're here for a reason. And that reason, I think, is to find a way out through the maze. And so for me, that's just a really great way of finding for myself why I'm here. Because I think that's a question we all ask ourselves at some point in our lives. And so for me, something horrible happened, but I found a way to make it better for myself and possibly other people. So I talk a lot about embodiment in my work, which is the body contains information that maybe the mind doesn't always give us. So from an embodiment perspective, Tim, what message did your cancer give you?
That's a really deep question for the king of deflection. Say the question again.
So when you think, so I'll do a little coaching. When you think of your body, right?
Yes.
And you think of cancer, I know cancer was physical for you. It's a blood cancer, so it's all over.
Yeah.
What did cancer give you in terms of a story or a message, or was there any impetus that cancer brought to the surface that you might have not thought of or ignored or put to the side, being the king of deflection, as you said?
That's a really good question. So my journey has very much been, I haven't been that physically affected by cancer throughout all of my journey. So for 15 years, I had cancer, or almost 15 years I had cancer, but I was pretty much living life like I didn't have cancer. And sure, I made some adjustments with things, but then when my cancer came back, that's really when I started evaluating different things in my life. And cancer also led to me sharing my story. I only started sharing my story after almost 15 years having cancer, because I was inspired by, there's someone named Steve Sullivan. He recently passed, unfortunately. His story's in the book there. He was a 35-year acute leukemia survivor. And so he's one of the people that inspired me to share my story. I also started sharing more personal aspects of my life on social media. Not super private, but different aspects, like things about family, about coffee, I also was getting chronic migraines, so I shared my journey of suffering with chronic migraines. And then I was invited on a show called Podcast Not Podcasts, where she invited me on, and I was like, what am I going to talk about? And I was like, let's talk about cancer. So really being diagnosed with cancer and my cancer coming back has really inspired me as you to give back and make a difference. Thanks. So on the flip side of your silver lining, what has been the most challenging part of your cancer journey, Savio?
I think it's the label. I think it's the label. It's just another label that I've had in my life. It's a label that comes with a lot of heaviness, because there's individuals that, when you mention that you're a survivor, they don't want to talk about it. Some of them do, but they don't want to overstep. Some of them know family and friends who passed away, so they're thinking to themselves, well, what did you do that they didn't, or they could have done? So it brings with it a lot of baggage. But I'm proud to wear the moniker, because I lost my hair to the chemo, and I realized I think I like the look. So now it's a badge of courage, and it makes my life a lot easier, totally a lot easier. But I think also it's also the weight of it, right? Because you kind of feel like Steve that we lost. It's like, well, why him, not me? So these ideas of survivor's guilt come up, and then you also feel to a degree, well, is my next scan going to be the scan that tells me that I have to start treatment again? So it comes with a lot of things that you don't want to do or do. Like, I'll be honest with you, I had my scan. I have a yearly scan with my oncologist. It's been going great for the last 8 years. It was supposed to happen last month, and I told them there's no way I could do a TEDx talk talking about my life, talking about cancer, knowing that something showed up on the scan and that you need to, come up with some type of treatment plan. I can't do it. So I said, I need to do it after my talk, and if something happens, happens. I feel great, and that's the thing about cancer. You feel great, but you don't know, especially a blood cancer, because many clients and also friends who, I tell people that my cancer is an invisible cancer. It's a blood cancer, but others can't hide from the fact that they lost body parts. They lost breast, they lost colon. I interviewed this voice actor in Hollywood named Rob Paulson. He's the voice of Animaniacs, Pinky and the Brain. His livelihood was his voice. He had throat cancer. He ended up beating it, but they told him, Rob, we're gonna have to kill you in order to save you. So he said the treatment's really bad. He said he barely even eats anymore, but he's alive and he can still do his craft. And so for me, just to sort of sum up this whole conversation is, it's the fact that individuals look at you differently because they know you're a survivor, which is a good thing and a bad thing. Yeah. Thanks for the question. Can you share your favorite life lesson that you learned from your experience?
Laugh a lot. Some friends who know me know that I love humor, and so we'll exchange GIFs, like little animations on direct messenger on different social medias that are just silly. And one of the GIFs that I often send is of goats. So a few years ago, I met a friend in Princeton, New Jersey, and we were at Barnes & Noble, and I found this box that said "Screaming Goat" on it. I had no idea what was inside, but I bought it. And so now goats, I should have brought it. Goats, well, Savio, you probably saw them at the event last year. And I'll often send screaming goats to people that I know, friends that just need a laugh, they're going through a hard time. Or even if they're not, just because it's silly. When you push the button, it just makes this screaming goat noise, and it's hilarious. At least I think it's hilarious. I don't know if anybody else does.
It's hilarious.
I'm glad you agree. Some people might think it's a little odd. But it's me, yes, exactly. Thanks for that question. It's a really good question. So Savio actually came to an event that I hosted last year called Showing Up Perspectives on Cancer. And when Savio showed up last year, we do a show at the live event that's also live streamed. So he was the guest. And Savio showed up. He was so generous to bring his book to the event and give one to every attendee. So my question, Savio, is this book that you wrote, I Survived Cancer and Here Is How I Did It. What inspired you to write it? Because you inspired me to write my book when you showed up with this format of your book.
It was really my editor who really inspired me to do that. I'm kind of like you. Before cancer, I was very good behind the scenes, very good at like making things work, but being front-facing and all that, cancer really pushed me to the forefront. So after interviewing, at that point, 170 cancer survivors, my editors were like, Savio, this has to be a book, my friend. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, it has to be a book. I'm like, okay. So I ended up picking 35 stories. I told my own journey story there. And I woke up the next day after it launched. It was my birthday.
Wow.
And it became a bestseller in 4 categories, which to me meant the story of hope survived, which is what I really, that was the purpose of the book. Really to tell the story and to make people realize that hope can never be extinguished if you believe, deeply believe. And so for me, the book was a culmination of hard work. There's an audiobook version of it as well. And then also just gleaning through all the stories and figuring out for myself what resonates with people. You know, I had the good fortune of interviewing celebrities like Venus Williams and Ice-T and Deborah Messing and Carson Kressley. And I remember one of the things that Venus told me, because she was launching a wellness brand, she's like, people look at me and they think like I'm this superstar athlete, but I'm going through my own wellness journey. She's, you know, she has gastrointestinal issue, situation where she had changed her diet drastically. And she says that for her, wellness is really about being alive. It's not about what people perceive her as, but it's about being really comfortable in the skin that she was born in. And so for me, I just really always use that as an anchor point whenever I talk to anyone about this idea of wellness and this idea of illness, and where do you stand between the two continuums. So Tim, how have you used your experience to make a positive impact in the world?
Thanks for that question, Savio. So, like I was saying before, I started sharing my cancer story almost 2 years ago. And I feel stories really connect us when it comes to cancer, really anything. But cancer, because it can be such, we all have our personal journeys, right? Some are more challenging, some are less challenging. But I feel like stories really connect us and make us more relatable to other people. So stories have really been a focus of how I've been trying to make a difference to sharing my cancer story. So whether it's in person, like here, next weekend, this coming week, September 30th and October 1st, I'm hosting an event called Showing Up Perspectives on Cancer. It's an in-person event in Scranton. And through the weekly live stream show, Showing Up Perspectives on Cancer, where we have conversations just like this as well. So I would say really stories that connect us. Sure. So Savio, we both create safe spaces for people to tell their stories. Could you talk about that? What do you think makes for a safe space?
I think what makes for a safe space in general is this idea of like true connection, like based upon shared interest or shared story or shared motivation. And so when I think of creating a safe space for cancer survivors, it's really about this idea that it doesn't have to be all pretty. It can be really messy. And just like a death in the family, cancer, the feelings rise up in moments that you didn't even think of. You know, 9/11 anniversary just happened. I actually lost a friend who was trapped on the 99th floor. I thought of him, and I obviously thought about my own journey, right, since that day. And I actually was supposed to work at the World Trade Center, but he actually was, he was a really generous guy, just graduated college, and I had lunch with him at the World Trade Center about a year prior. And he's like, why don't you come here and work for me? He was a VP of a company called Alliance Consulting. And I'm like, I was like in my early 20s, I was like, Eric, I'm not a suit and tie guy. I just can't do it, Eric. I'm like, I really can't. He's like, really? Like, you'll make like really good money? And I'm like, Eric, I really can't do it. And so I tell that story because I really trusted this inner knowing. And I know it's silly about not wearing a suit, but I trusted this inner knowing for myself that it just wasn't the right fit for me. And so when I think of safe spaces, I think about really asking the right questions with people that you want to share your journey with and your feelings with. And I think that's what makes a safe space, is this idea that we are all in this together and we can kind of get through it together as well. So, yeah. That's what I think of.
Yeah.
Thank you. So last question, what advice do you have for a newly diagnosed cancer patient or survivor who's currently in the struggle?
So I remember when I was first diagnosed, there were lots of family members calling and things like that, and I wasn't ready to, you know, when you're diagnosed with cancer, you are not, maybe some people are, but you might not want to be bombarded with phone calls. Now they're probably very loving phone calls and people that want to visit you, but you might not be ready for that. What's your question?
What advice would you give to a newly diagnosed cancer patient or survivor who's currently in the struggle?
Yeah, so I would say be honest with your friends and family. You know, at different points in your journey, you may want to be showered with love. At other points, you may want to go hide in the forest, like I like to do oftentimes. So I would say just be transparent with the people that you love in your life, and because they might not know what to say or do, or, you know, some may reach out, some may disappear because they don't know what to do. So just be honest. That would be my thing. And then my last question, Savio, would be, what is your one-word perspective on cancer?
It might be cliche, but it's hope. I think hope is really what allows us to continue. I think hope is what really allows us to be inspired. And I think hope is what allows us to find a way, whatever that way is, through the maze of life.
I love that word. And I would say my one word is community, because cancer brings us together, like right here as we share our stories. So at this point, what we'd really like to do is we'd like to open it up for questions. Anybody have any questions? Wendy?
I'm very experienced in this. My partner has cancer. 6 of my girlfriends have cancers, all different kinds of cancers. On the upside, this is an amazing time to have cancer. The amount of drugs, it is unbelievable what they've come up with, and longevity. Cancers that would take people out in 6 months. People are, you know, we're going into 5, 6, 7, or 8 years already. The area where it's lacking, first of all, I want to thank both of you. You for being a wellness coach, for writing this book and interviewing these people, giving them a voice and getting that out there. You, Tim, you're doing a podcast. Podcasts are brilliant. I have 2 of them. Yours addresses cancer. So you are sharing that, and then you're going and doing live events. But where the big hole is between medical, where you have the fabulous cancer doctor, and I'll say to my partner's cancer doctor, why this, why that? He's like, that's not my area, I'm a cancer doctor. He said, that's not my area where we've got this big gaping hole. I actually joined a group on Facebook because I needed to know the side effects, the real side effects, not what they give me in the pamphlet. You think half the patients read the pamphlet? They don't. They're sick. You're giving sick people a pamphlet. All right, you join a Facebook group that I did so I could give my partner information. The information was unbelievable. He had been in chronic pain that was addressed with Allegra or Claritin, antihistamines. You're shaking your head because you obviously know this remedy. Nobody ever told me this. He walked around in pain for a month. And then when I asked about it, they said, well, you know what, yeah, we knew about that, but let him make an appointment with a palliative care doctor who addresses pain. And of course, that appointment's not a month from now. How do we fix this hole? You're giving a TED Talk. You're both out there shaking it up. But you know what? The medical world is not there with you. What do you think the answer is?
Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, more than happy to answer that question. I think when it comes to medicine in general, like you said, it's wonderful, but it's siloed. There's a difference between medicine, healing, and illness, and there needs to be a connection between the two. Because as the doctor mentioned, I don't know, he can go here, I'm only this, right? Because they're siloed because they also are under big pharma, they have their insurance, things to worry about. So I think the key here is, and we live in a great time, even though there's dissension among many of us, we have access to information. It's readily available. I set up a Google alert in 2014. I got everything I could think of about my cancer because I want to understand it frontwards and backwards. And a large part of the people in my book said you have to advocate for yourself. And if you have friends who don't know what to talk about since you just got diagnosed, have them come in for the appointment. Let them be your scribe. Let them do the job that they want to do because they're doing something for you. And you just need to focus on getting yourself better, whatever that means and however that means. Like I mentioned, healing is not one-dimensional.
No, it's not.
Healing is a path, and it's a path that we all must face if we're going through that struggle. So that's my answer to your question.
Thank you.
I love that you brought up self-advocacy because that's so important, and that topic comes up over and over again on the show that I do. And the other thing I would just say is, like, there's definitely a disconnect, with the medical community, and so, like, continuing to share our stories and connect with other survivors and supporters, and there's incredible nonprofits out there as well that we can connect with. I think that helps bridge the gap. It doesn't solve the problem. But by connecting with people that have gone through maybe similar things, it can help, find some solutions, hopefully. Thanks for your question, Wendy. Hi there.
How many questions do I get? Hopefully 2 is okay.
Go for it.
Asking for a friend.
Yeah.
So the first question is for Savio. And when both of you it was a tornado that came out of nowhere and you were urged to go immediately. So in the case of someone who is being told that they're perhaps stage 3 and the lymph nodes are not yet on fire but hot, and putting them off and say, come back in 6 months, I'm confused. And at what point for Savio do you say yes to chemotherapy for someone who is very averse to modern medicine? And I'm so happy that you brought that up because it's so confusing that we do have to access medicine if you need it, but how do you convince a person that could be better than the other?
So I didn't have a choice in the matter. They literally put me in the 5th floor. But to answer your question, definitely get that second and third opinion. I think it's vitally important. There's so many other ways of healing beyond the traditional route of chemo, which I'm an advocate of. Don't get me wrong. I think it's wonderful. It helped me. But there's things like this idea of tackling it from a holistic perspective, right? So I think really the key is to educate yourself, figure out what's actually going on, get your second and third opinions, and I would really say for that friend of yours, for them to search themselves. I think what ends up happening is we don't search within ourselves. We go by what I call the Wizard of Oz, which is this doctor who we just allay all our power to, who has all the answers, but then we kind of find out that maybe the answers weren't completely correct.
Yeah.
So I think the key is to do all those things, but really to search yourself. Because I think in life generally, whether it's cancer or not, if we really figure out what really works for us, then we're okay with whatever the outcomes are. It's only when something happens that's adverse to what we think should happen is when we have sorrow and judgment and blame for. So I don't know if that completely answers your question, but I really would say it's really to just take stock in whatever that doctor has mentioned and say, you know what, this is not working for me. I don't feel comfortable with waiting 6 months. Because I know people who have cancer, I know people who survive cancer, I know people who die from cancer, who waited just long enough where it metastasized and then it was too late. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, it does.
So yes,
Do you have another question?
You guys okay with this? So just
Yeah.
that, I really appreciate especially that you're saying sometimes they're wrong, and you do have to get even the third opinion. So that's what we're going for, right? And then, so you both had to go to the 7th floor and the 3rd floor or whatever. But how do you, how do you get someone to choose life? And can they quit their job and start their real life? Is that, yeah.
That's a really good question. How do you get someone to choose life? I mean, what is inspiring them to keep living? Maybe ask that question, or have a conversation. Like, what are some things that they love in life? Is it family members? Do they love nature? Do they love writing? Do they, maybe like try to have a conversation around the things that are really positive in their life, even though maybe cancer is not so positive sometimes. Does that help?
Yes, for sure.
Absolutely.
I would probably relate it to, my dad is still alive, he's 85 years old, thankfully does not have a debilitating disease. He does have osteoarthritis, it's really crippling for him, but I keep mentioning to him, and maybe because I'm a coach, about this vision. I said, Dad, if you could be healthy right now and not have this pain, what would you want to do? I said, well, because he has 4 grandchildren, he would want to see one of them. She's 21, she's in a relationship, wants to get married. I'm like, wonderful, that's great. So I said, you need to take actions, even if it's micro actions every day. Fortunately, he has access to my tools, but I have many of them, to do what you need to do to get to that vision. A vision is not a goal, a vision is a feeling. It's a inclination, it's a some type of objective to where you want to go. So you need to ask them, and once again, it comes from searching themselves to figure out what's really motivating them here. And I have to say, and I'm really honest, and Tim knows this about me, when it comes to life, we have 2 choices. Either we live or we die. We're all going to go at some point. How much longer do you want to live in order to accomplish what you want to accomplish? So that's the end of, that's what I would say.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Mom.
I don't have a question, but a comment.
Yes.
My sister is terminally ill with cancer, her 5th cancer, and she's had the roughest time, with the chemo and the treatment, but she always goes by, keep it in the day, live for the day, and it seems to help so much. Like, she might have a day, she's so sick and so dizzy and so nauseous. The next day, she might be a little better. She'll be out for lunch, or she'll try, like, to go to a show or something like that. She had been able in the past when she had more strength, But I had another friend, her name was Mary Kip, and she was terminally ill. She was already in her 80s. And she used to always say, every day is a gift. Every day is a gift. No matter how sick she was, she had tubes hanging out of her chest, she had weeping, she'd be in the car dropping off chocolate chip cookies to somebody or something like that. But people that kind of think that way, it seems to me, seem to do better. They're not looking like 5 years down the road. They're just looking at today. What do I have to be grateful for today? And really love the day. That's my comment.
Thank you, and you were kind of outed as mom. So that's mom, and that's dad, and shout out to all the parents and caregivers. Any other questions? No? Okay, before we go, what I'd love to do is First of all, I'd like to invite any of you who would want to share your cancer stories, whether you're a cancer patient, survivor, supporter, if you'd like to share your story on my show, come up and we can exchange contact information. Would love to extend that invitation to you. Savio, thank you so much for being here today. Tell people where they can find your book or if they want to connect with you, please.
You can find me at my website. It's called The Human Resolve. I'm on social media at the same handle. I really believe resolve is all we have. Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Savio. And you can find out more information, or if you'd like to find my book, Perspectives on Cancer, you could go to perspectivesoncancer.com. There's also information about the in-person event next week in Scranton. It's a free event. It's both Saturday and Sunday, and we come together, we share our cancer stories. There's speakers to inspire us, and we'll be doing a show, showing a Perspectives on Cancer show with a live audience that'll also be live streamed. So perspectivesoncancer.com if you want to find any information. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming out, and I hope you had a great time at the festival.